You're listening to Seek Travel Ride, a podcast sharing the incredible stories of people taking bike adventures all over the world. And I want to give a shout out to our show sponsor, Old Man Mountain. Not only are they the maker of the toughest, most adventure-ready bike racks and bags out there, but they've also just recently launched a new line, Hemlock Bags with Flip Cages. Check them out for your adventures at oldmanmountain.com. And now on to today's episode.
When we arrived, it was actually quite misty in Kathmandu. It was the end of the monsoon, so it was quite hazy and stuff. We set off to go up to Everest. You follow the road out to Jiri, I think it is, and then sort of head up the tracks, and you sort of see all the mountains in the distance. At the back of your mind, you're just kind of thinking, one of those is Everest, you know, the highest mountain in the world. And you don't know which one it is because all you can see is all these sort of peaks really in the distance. And it's just absolutely amazing. You feel so insignificant, and especially, you know, when you come from the Alps in Europe, and, you know, the Alps are big. They look big and they feel so big, but the Himalayas are twice that size. It's just incredible.
Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners.
Hey listeners, Bella here. Before we get started, I want to let you know this is part one of a two-part conversation with guest Phill Hargreaves. Phil's journey, cycling from the UK to Australia and back again in the mid-1980s, is probably one of the most incredible adventures I've been able to share on the podcast so far. And there was just simply no way that I could fit it all into one episode. So in this first part, you're going to hear about his early travels through Europe and the Middle East, the challenges which he faced along the way, going from a team of 3 to a team of 2 very unexpectedly in Turkey, and how he ended up carrying his bike all the way to Everest Base Camp. I'll be releasing part 2 next week, so be sure to tune in for the rest of his incredible journey then. But in the meantime, let's get started. Hello listeners, it's Bella Malloy here, host of Seek Travel Ride, and today I'm joined by guest Phill Hargreaves. In 1984, Phill and his two friends set off from the UK with the ambitious goal of cycling all the way to Australia. Along the way, they would ride across Europe, navigating the challenges of what was known then as the Iron Curtain, and crossing over into the Middle East during the height of the Iran-Iraq War. They battled illness, traversed extreme terrain, and then in Turkey, an unexpected turn of events forced them to continue on as a team of 2. But without a doubt, one of the most extraordinary parts of Phil's journey was his adventure to reach Everest Base Camp, on a steel Mercian touring bike no less. Because listeners, this is the mid-80s and mountain biking as we know it, well, it didn't really exist. But Phil's journey didn't end there in the Himalayas, and despite his other riding companion calling it quits, he instead decided to continue on solo. He made his way through Southeast Asia before finally arriving in Australia. He cycled there as well, and then over to New Zealand before eventually deciding to make his way back to the UK, via China, of course. All up, it would be almost 3 years on the road before he'd return back to his parents' house in the north of England, having covered a distance of around 30,000 miles. Now, I first came across Phil's story via his son Jamie. That's right, Jamie is a fellow podcast guest, and he's currently reenacting this very journey just 40 years later. So how could I possibly turn down the awesome opportunity to interview Phill and hear all about how this original adventure unfolded? Taken at a time well before the existence of smartphones, the internet and GPS devices. A time where we knew a lot less about the countries and areas we could travel to, but which also perhaps meant there was also a possibility of setting off for a real proper adventure into the unknown. So strap in listeners, I have no doubt we are in for some incredible stories to come as we go back in time 40 years and learn about a most incredible journey. Phill Hargreaves, a big warm welcome to the show.
Hi, Bella. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm super, super excited, Phill. Your reputation precedes you. Now,
Gosh.
Phill, I have a super long list of questions for you, but the question which I start my show with, and I ask it to all my guests, is, Phill Hargreaves, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
I do, actually, yeah. In fact, my very, very first bike wasn't actually a bike, it was a tricycle. It's one of those memories that I don't actually have a physical memory of it. It's from from photographs, really, when I was on my parents' photographs. And there's a picture of me on my little tricycle. It was one of those 1960s ones with blue and red, painted blue and red, with a little sort of, not a basket, a little trunk on the back that you put things in. And there's a picture of me in my grandparents' garden riding it up the path. So that's kind of my non-memory, but my actual first memory of an actual bicycle was actually my mum's bicycle. And when I was about, I must have been, I guess, 9, 10, 11 possibly, and it must have been the summer holidays. We were quite lucky when we were younger. My parents both camped and, took us away on holiday to Wales, and we didn't travel abroad, but we holidayed in the UK at various different places. So I knew there was a bigger world there, and it must have been a summer holiday, and I found Mum's bike in the garage. Tyres were flat, and she didn't really use it anymore. So I thought, I could ride this. And I wasn't actually tall enough to ride the bike. It was an old red Rally Ladies frame with, it was cream metal mudguards on it. So I pumped the tyres up, and I could stand up on it and pedal, but I couldn't actually sit on the seat and pedal. I could kind of reach the pedals sitting on the seat, but not actually pedaling from the seat. And I remember sort of thinking, I can get around, because when you're that age, your world is sort of, I knew the world was bigger, but your world's quite limited to where you can get to. You probably half a mile radius of the house or something. So anyway, I managed to get on this bike, and I started going out on it during the day. This is without Mum and Dad's knowledge. They were both at work probably. And so I'd go off with my mates who lived on the other side of school, which was probably 3 or 4 miles away. And then, we had an old army barracks that was sort of a little bit away, and we used to meet up there, and then there was other, parks and things. And my whole world sort of suddenly expanded from this sort of small, the local park around the back of the house and your friends down the next street sort of thing. My sort of world had just expanded. And I remember that summer was great, and, we did loads of things, just headed off, and found roads and places that you didn't know existed locally. And then, unfortunately, I don't know whether it was then or maybe later that year, I was riding back from somewhere, and I did that thing that all cyclists have done, and I was looking down at the gears or something to see what gear I was in, or looking down at something, had my head down and rode straight into the back of a parked car, not too far from home, and bent the forks back and, basically wrecked the bike. Had to get it back home, and by this time Mum and Dad knew I was going out on this bike sort of thing. But yeah, so that wrecked the bike, and so that was the end of that.
Do you know what I was just thinking? Now, maybe this is 50 years, not 40, but didn't Jamie do something similar which actually wrecked his bike? Didn't he run into the back of a van or something that totaled his bike?
Oh, yes, he did, yes. He in Tbilisi, in fact. Or just outside of Tbilisi.
He's just following in your footsteps all the time.
Yeah, I didn't do that on the world tour, but I did it at home. Yeah.
It's so evident hearing you speak, though, Phill, that this zest for adventure and exploring places. My gosh, that was just inside of you. Like the way that you tell that story of getting your mum's bike, not being able to sit on the seat, but just being filled with excitement of the places you're able to get to now.
Yeah.
In fact, it was when you were growing up, you joined, was it called the Cyclists Touring Club?
That's right, yeah.
How old were you when you joined?
So how that came about was basically after I ruined Mum's bike, my world suddenly shrank back down again and became limited. And I think I was, shall we say, I was rather boisterous at that age anyway, and full of beans, as a lot of teenagers are, and got into a bit of trouble, with other friends, and I got dragged home by the police one day for some minor sort of thing locally. And of course, Mum and Dad were horrified. And so for my next birthday, I think they decided that I needed something to, I was a lot less trouble when I was out on the bike. So Mum and Dad had both been cyclists as well back in the 50s. Dad had been in the cycle touring club himself, and Mum had as well. So they bought me a bike for my birthday. I think it was my 11th birthday, and that was a Mercian as well, actually. And Dad said, we're going to get you this bike and all that sort of stuff, but I'm going to take you down to the cycling club, and you're going to go out with them sort of thing, so you can learn the ropes and do it properly. So I got this bike anyway, and Dad took me down, and he still had friends who were in the club from when he was there in the 50s that he still knew. So he introduced me to them, and there was a guy there called, Len Northern and Charlie Beard, who, I mean, Len Northern was well into his 70s by the time I joined. And he kind of took me under his wing. He'd been in the cycling club for years. And so my whole life then was, everything was about the bike. We used to have, there was a cycling club meet every Sunday. So we'd meet in Derby and head off into the Peak District or into Staffordshire or Leicestershire. Because where Derby is, it's quite sort of central to, we're just south of the Peak District, and it's a brilliant place for getting to other places. So we'd go off every weekend and do a, 40, 50, 60, 70 mile ride. And then midweek, we used to have a club night I think it was on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. So in the winter, we'd have people would come and do slideshows or come and do talks about trips they'd done. In the summer, we'd have evening meets. So you'd do a local ride, maybe out to places, and then at least once a month, and sometimes more in the summer, we'd have a weekend meet where you'd go off to a youth hostel somewhere or a bit further on, and sometimes you'd go away on a Friday night. When I started working a bit later, we used to go cycle to work with all your kit on, go straight from work, meet up with, Dave and others, and we'd cycle over to Wales on a Friday night, cycle around Wales on Saturday and Sunday, and then get back home Sunday night and back to work Monday morning sort of thing. So,
how awesome! Sorry, I'm just here listening to it. I'm here listening to this, Phill, thinking, oh my gosh, where was this in my life when I was growing up? Surely places like this must have existed in Australia when I was growing up, but they didn't exist in my world. What an awesome way to travel from a young... Because you were young when you first joined it.
Oh, yeah. So it's 11, 12, I think it was, which was common. I mean, there were the CTC it's a national club, and it's still going now. And they have, sort of local sort of districts and stuff. So there was one in Burton-on-Trent about 10, 15 miles away from Derby, and one in Nottingham. And so we used to have club meets up where you'd meet up with these other clubs, and they were full of, young kids. I mean, most of my friends now still, a lot of them are from those cycling days in the cycling clubs. We all used to meet up and have joint meets at youth hostels or camping. And you look back now, I don't think I realised at the time how lucky it was and how exciting it all was, because, we got to see pretty well the most of Britain by the time I was 14 or 15. I'd been all around Wales on my bike, up to Scotland, up to the lakes. And I remember, in fact, we did a school trip one year at school, and we went up to, there's a valley in Derbyshire Dales called Lathgildale. And we did it was one of the geology classes or geography classes, and we did a school trip up there. All the kids at school went on the bus from school, and I cycled up there instead and met them up there.
How awesome!
And then cycled back. And I mean, you couldn't even do that now. They wouldn't allow that.
They
sort
wouldn't
of thing
let
now.
you. No, they wouldn't let you. I mean,
yeah.
Oh gosh, I feel like I've crossed the bridge into becoming a much older generation. A woman shaking fist at cloud. But just the thought even. And I reflect back on Australia, we have a big car culture, but even I think the amount of kids riding their bikes to school is just dwindling year on year on year.
Oh,
and I imagine it's probably the same in the UK as well.
Yeah, it is, yeah. I mean, cycling over here in the last few years since the Olympics has had a bit of a boom, but I think it's all kind of dying off again now. But it's more kind of more mature people. It's not really younger people that are doing it, which is, I think it's a great shame.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Phill, I'm here sitting excitedly listening to your stories from, since joining this club when you were, 12? And I just think, you've got mates that were at the club, you've had journeys with those people. I just think of all the stories that are shared and swapped. And
Yeah, the thing is, we're still doing it now. My one of my friends who, again, from the cycling club, he was in Manchester, Phil Cunningham. We're planning a ride later on this year, doing the Pamir Highway, hopefully. We're still doing it, and I know, Dave Clark, they're out cycling still and doing stuff. So, yeah, I think it lives with you. It's one of those things, when you're brought up with that sort of thing, it just stays with you. It's just part of your life, part of the things you do.
This is absolutely mega. I'll have to have you on again. Wow. Because you mentioned Dave Clark there. So this journey that you took from Derby to Australia, and back again, really, it was you and two Daves, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, it originally started out, what happened was, in fact, on my 21st birthday, I'd just finished my apprenticeship, and it was my 21st birthday, so we were meeting up in Derbyshire at a pub in one of the villages in Derbyshire. You used to be able to camp behind it in the garden and have a good old session there. So we were meeting up with all the lads from Manchester that we knew, like Phill Cunningham and other folk. And we were actually out on the ride. We'd ridden up on the Friday night, and we were out on the ride with a few of us on the Saturday morning, riding to the pub. We'd done a bit of a ride round, and we were heading to the pub for lunch. And I actually fell off my bike on a corner. Just sort of slept off, you know, it was a country lane, a gravelly sort of country lane, and I don't exactly know what happened, but came off, just fell off. Didn't think anything of it, you know, come off a bike, and I tried to get up and realised that something wasn't quite right with my leg. And I'd broken my leg at the bottom, and so the pub was only literally just round the corner. So Dave went, so he said, "Oh look, you know, I've done something to my leg. I think I've broken it." And they were like, "No, you know, how they are," sort of thing. No, you haven't. Come on, get up. And I said, "No, I really think I've broken my leg." Anyway, they kind of somebody went and called an ambulance, and Dave went round the corner to the pub, came back with a pint of beer for me.
I was going to say, someone's bringing you a pint, aren't they? Yeah. I could just picture this is in the story.
So I sat at the side of the road with a pint of beer sort of thing, and the ambulance turned up, and they went, "Oh no, we don't think you've broken your leg." And I was going, "Oh, there's definitely something wrong with it." So they carted me off to Sheffield Hospital, and sure enough, I'd broken my leg. So we were actually due to go on holiday cycling around the Dolomites about 2 weeks later, I think it was. Obviously, that went out the window. And then, so I spent that summer basically, I was in plaster for I think it was about 8 weeks. The first few weeks were horrendous because it was just agony. Couldn't do anything. And then my sister was off. She was a teacher, and so she was then off for the summer. And we ended up going round. She was driving around all these places and went off to Wales camping and doing all this stuff. And I came up to Manchester, and one of my mates had the old step-through, little Honda step-through motorbike, C60 or C70, I think it was. So we used to go out and ride. They'd cycle, and I'd ride this motorbike with my broken leg sticking out. And I had such a great time. It was like, it was kind of freedom, because I'd gone straight from school. I literally finished school on a Friday and started work on a sort of Monday almost. And so I'd never had that break between, a gap year or anything like that. I started my apprenticeship. And then I'd finished my apprenticeship, and there was two of us that had started at the same time. They'd given us this opportunity to go and do a HNC. So I'd applied to do this HNC while I was off. I'd been informed that
Hang on. Australian here. What is a HNC?
HNC was, so when you did your apprenticeship, you kind of qualified, and then a HNC was like a high national certificate. So, yeah, kind of high level, or kind of like a degree, not quite a degree.
Like a diploma or something like that?
Yeah, a bit higher than that, sort of not quite a degree, but sort of higher than a sort of your normal stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'd applied to do this, and unfortunately got the other guy, clever Trevor he was, had been accepted, and I hadn't. And I was really quite miffed, because I knew that I was actually better than he was. Anyway, I got a bit despondent at that point. So, I'm really fed up with this. And then, so I was still off, and then I thought, I've had enough of this, because I qualified. So I was a qualified sort of electrical engineer. I thought, you know what, I'm gonna finish work. I'm gonna save a bit of money or get some more money together. And at that time, well, even now, I've got relatives who live in America. My cousins all went out, or my uncles and aunties went out in the 60s. And I thought, right, I'm gonna quit work, and I'm gonna go and cycle around America. Get a bit of money saved up, because this was kind of getting towards, it would have been August, I guess, something like that. So I thought, I kind of had this bit of a loose plan of doing that in my head. And then I had the plaster off my leg, and we had all my cycling mates from Manchester were all doing a trip up to Scotland. So I had the plaster off my leg on like the Thursday or something. Caught the train up to Scotland on the Saturday with my bike. Met up with them in Scotland, and we did this trip round, and Dave Clark actually came on that as well. And he'd just found out that he was potentially going to be made redundant from work, and he had to make a call while we were up in Scotland to find out whether he was going to be one of those made redundant or not. And I said, well, hey, what about, I've got this plan, I've been thinking about going over to America, what about joining me? We could go and do that together. And he was like, oh yeah, that sounds really good. But then he kind of didn't want to go to America for some reason, I can't remember why. So we kind of bandied around a few ideas, and I don't know which one of us actually came up with it. I know we'd done a trip through Yugoslavia, I think it was the year before, and really enjoyed that, because it was still behind the Iron Curtain then, and we'd cycled down from, I think we flew to Salzburg and went down to Venice, and then across to Trieste, and down through Yugoslavia and back round for about 3 weeks, and had a great time. And it was really very different to Europe. It was kind of like going back into the 30s and 40s almost, horses and carts and stuff like that. And we had a great time. And so I think one of us came up with the idea, what about heading back down there, maybe going to Turkey and stuff. And then it kind of evolved from that, really. And then
got a bit out of hand.
yeah. And then we kind of, one of us came up with this sort of, what about Derby to Derby? And then we sort of, because we'd done all the rough stuff as well, and tracks, and then we thought, what about going up to Everest Basecamp? We could do that as well, and that might be a bit of a catch, and kind of it just kind of, came about like that, really.
Wow. Do you ever wonder, I guess if he hadn't have been made redundant, you would have gone to the States?
Quite possibly, yeah, more than likely, yeah, and it would have been a completely different experience, yeah.
So hang on, that's 2 of you, but there's 3 of you that set off on this ride.
Yeah, so Dave Cross was a friend. Myself and Dave Clark had known each other for, since we were like 12, 13 back in Derby, in the Derby CTC. And then we kind of met up with the Manchester crowd and got in, and Dave Cross was kind of involved with them, cycling. I would have been on a few weekends with them. So we knew him, but didn't know him as well as we knew each other. And I think he was the same. He was about our age, and I think he'd just finished his, I think he did a printing apprenticeship, and he'd just kind of finished that, and we were on another meet. I think it was a little bit later than the Scotland trip, and we kind of, we bumped into him, we got chatting about it, and he said, can I come as well? And we went, well, yeah, why not? The more the merrier sort of thing. So he kind of came along, and this was kind of, would have been the end of 83. So we kind of decided that we were going to sort of, try and get a bit of sponsorship possibly and save money up and get the stuff sorted out. I mean, we had most of the kind of kit anyway. We'd been cycle camping and stuff in Europe and the UK anyway. But there were obviously, there were a few other things that we needed, more specialist stuff or whatever. So we said, well, let's kind of set a date of like April next year. We don't want to be leaving through the winter sort of thing through Europe. The earliest you want to be leaving is sort of April time. So we set a date of sort of the beginning of April, and then kind of tried to organise stuff, and we wrote off to various people to see if we could get a bit of sponsorship.
How did you go with that?
Well, we did get some. Dave Cross's uncle was the PR director, I think it was, of a company called Colour Roll, and they used to make like household furniture and wallpaper and curtains and stuff like nothing linked to outdoor stuff. And so Dave approached him, and he said, "Oh yeah, we'll be up to support you and give you a bit of sort of money in if you do a bit of PR for us." So we got some cycling tops made up.
Are they the red tops?
Yeah, the red. Yeah. I've got one here. Look, here's one that I prepared.
Now, is that the one that I have seen a photo of when you're up in Nepal in the Himalayas?
Yeah. We had several of them. We had a sort of long sleeve one and a short sleeve one. So yeah, I've still got that. And so he managed to get a bit of money to sort of share out between us, and then we wrote off to some outdoor sort of companies, local ones. There was a company called what they call Snowpatch. That was it. They were just starting up. They sort of gave us some jackets that they'd made as a new thing to try out. But we weren't that successful. We got a little bit of stuff, but it wasn't that successful.
It's interesting. Like, how you were saying it was the end of 83, you were scheming where to go and how to do this, and then you weren't setting off until I think it was the 1st of April in 84.
Yeah.
So you've got that time to prepare. If we fast forward you to this time, modern times, you'd be on the internet, you'd be trawling Google Maps, you'd be figuring out about things potentially. Some people wouldn't, but, just the way we learn about stuff now is so different. I guess in a way, the fact that you grew up with that cycle touring sort of background from being a teenager, did you sort of not overly prepare stuff because there was an element of you knew that you'd work things out along the way?
Yeah, I mean, most of the practical side of it, if you like, the sort of cycling stuff, the tent, the camping and all that, we were pretty well on top of that. It was more the stuff that we tried to really prepare for, I suppose, but didn't have that much preparation, was really things like the visas and where we were actually going to go, because I know we applied for some of the visas before we left. In fact, that was one of the things that was a bit of a pain, really. We got the Australian visas before we left, but we had to enter Australia within a year, which was, in the end, I mean, obviously we didn't realise at the time, but had I known that now, I mean, which is what Jamie's done actually. He's not applied for his Australian visa yet because he didn't want to be sort of pushed for time.
Yeah.
So that kind of restricted me certainly a bit in the end. I mean, obviously Dave ended up coming back, but had I had more time, I would have spent more time probably in Nepal and Thailand and places like that. Whereas in the end, sort of going down there, I had to arrive in Australia before, I think it was before April 85, so it ended up being a little bit of a rush. But really, from the planning sort of wise, that was all we did, really. We kind of came up with a rough route of where we were going to go, and that was it, because there was no, there was no internet or anything where you could go, oh, well, let's have a look and see what the score is with, Iran or whatever, and stuff like that. There was no, I don't think there were even many of, I think, like the Lonely Planet, or the precursor to the Lonely Planet guides, Asia on a Shoestring and stuff like that, were only just kind of coming out about then.
Yeah.
In fact, I did pick up a copy of Asia on a Shoestring in, I think that might have been Kathmandu or Bangkok, possibly.
I was today's days old when I heard of Asia on a Shoestring, and I'm going to Google it when I get off this.
Oh, right.
Which is the weird, hilarious concept to think about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, it's basically, it was the forerunner, Lonely Planet guides.
Wow, I didn't know this.
Yeah, Tony, is it Tony Pond? I think the guy that came up with that. It was like the sort of forerunner of Lonely Planet guides, yeah. Yeah, Asia on a Shoestring, yeah.
And picking one up, did you say were you in Nepal and Kathmandu?
Yeah, it was either Kathmandu or Bangkok, yeah. I think it's Southeast Asia on a Shoestring I got. And then that was, basically like a sort of, nothing like they are today, but it was more around, kind of the backpacker scene as well, where to catch buses from, and, which hostels, but not that there were many those days, you could stay at, so.
And in terms of the way, like from a practical point of view, obviously you were camping, you've mentioned that. When I interviewed Jamie, something that's really apparent with how he's doing this trip is he's doing what we would call dirt bagging. He's staying in bus shelters, sometimes the same ones that you stayed in.
Yeah.
And places like that. This is obviously the same style that you were doing it in just back in 84.
Yeah, we were just sort of bivvying out in places, again, it was one of the things we'd always done, we used to bivvy out in forests in the UK and, barns and on tops of mountains. You get a good, a nice evening out sort of thing. It's amazing to sort of bivvy out and not have a tent round you. Obviously, it's not so good when it's pouring with rain. So, we used to do that, and we'd pitch up in, we stayed in bush shelters and park benches in Germany and caves and things like that. And then obviously camped where you could. But it's not always, especially around, when you're around built-up areas, it's sometimes quite difficult to find somewhere. So, you just find somewhere that's got a bit of shelter, or, say, if it's a dry-looking night, just a field. And just throw your stuff up and sleep out there.
Listeners, I don't know about you, but one of the best things about going on a bike adventure is being fully immersed in the ride. The only thing that you're listening to is the sound of nature all around you. But nothing kills that experience faster than gear which just annoyingly rattles, shifts around, or fails when the weather turns bad. That's why I'm super excited about our show sponsor, Old Man Mountain's new Hemlock bags. They are 100% waterproof. They're going to get you through the worst of the weather. They're ultra durable and totally secure. And best of all, when they're locked in place, they are silent. That's right. No rattling, no slipping, just silent reliability, which is what you want for your bike adventure. Ride with gear that's reliably built for your adventures. Check them out at our bespoke link, oldmanmountain.com/seek travel ride, and support the brands that support the podcast. Now, back to the episode. With interviewing guests who've done extensive travel now, one of the great things that I learn about is obviously the hospitality of people that you didn't know existed to you on the day. You'll meet a stranger, and there's lots of them who've had those beautiful moments of being welcomed into their houses. I'm guessing that would have happened for you at some stage on this journey as well?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Where did that start happening? Was it early on, or? It
actually started before we'd even left England.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, we got put up in a pub down south somewhere, and I remember they gave us, I can't remember what the pub was called actually, but it was somewhere southwest of London. And we just rocked up, and the guy said, "Oh yeah, you can stay here." And he said, "We've got," and the sort of motive of the pub was a pig, and he had these T-shirts with the pig and the sort of pub name on it. And he said, "Oh, take these with you," and bought us a meal and stuff like that. And he basically carried on. We got put up in the Rommel tank barracks in Germany somewhere. We arrived there one night, night, and got chatting to this guy who was in the army. And he said, "Oh, come and stay with us in the barracks." And so we ended up having a night in the barracks somewhere. And then, it really carried on all the way through. I mean, it was certainly probably more prevalent once you got further east. Turkey, we had some fantastic hospitality. And even stuff like when we were going down through Yugoslavia, we followed the coast down a bit and then cut inland across to Sarajevo, towards Sarajevo, and then we left Sarajevo. And that particular day, we ended up going up this big pass and riding through a tunnel at the top. Dave hit a massive pothole. Dave Clark hit a massive pothole in the middle of this dark tunnel. We had no lights, it was pitch black, and basically bent the frame back. And we were thinking, oh crikey, it's the end of the trip sort of thing for Dave, what we're going to do. And anyway, we managed to get down to the next town, which fortunately had a train station there. We got chatting to some people and we were like, is there a bike shop here? Is there somebody could fix this? And they were like, oh no, but there's a guy in Belgrade, this cyclist guy in Belgrade called Mandovic, his name, something Mandovic. If you go there, he might be able to help you out. So we thought, all right, okay, well, let's get on the train. So we got on the train up to Belgrade. Didn't know where this guy lived, so we were asking around for this guy. It sounds ridiculous now, but we just asked people and said, oh, we Mandovic, bicycle, and got pointed down this, And anyway, we eventually made it to this.
Could you just imagine turning up to Belgrade now saying Mandovic with a bike?
Yeah.
Oh yes. Yeah. Down left.
That's right, yeah. And
second left on the right.
it was literally like that. And anyway, we eventually found this guy's house, and I think he was an Olympic cyclist for Yugoslavia or something like that.
Oh, he was a real proper bike guy then, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And he built frames. He built frames out of Reynolds 531, which was what the Dave's bike was made of. Yeah. So he took us in and he put us up for 3 days, fixed Dave's bike, built him a new, disassembled his bike, replaced all the bent bits, rebuilt it all, put us up for a few nights. Didn't want any money for it. We didn't pay him for it, and he was just sort of thrilled to be able to help us. And yeah, we had that sort of hospitality all the way around. It was amazing.
And it stays with you too, then, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
Like it's one of those things, because I imagine you would have just naturally, just the people that you're associating with and your friends are people that are doing the similar sort of adventures. But I imagine someone that travels as so much as you have, Phill, on a bike. If you're out and about at home and you see someone that's out there having a bike adventure on a touring bike or something like that, I imagine you're curious enough to sort of find out a bit more about them and have a chat and stuff as well.
Oh yeah, all the time, yeah. Whenever we're out, we get around a lot at home, out for weekends and walking and cycling as well now, and you're always bumping into people, and it's I always kind of make a point of going over to, especially to look like they're foreigners or they're going a long way sort of thing, and offer your home up and stuff like that. So,
did you come across a lot of touring cyclists when you were actually riding 40 years ago? Like, did you see many others? Because I had this notion. The classic route now, if people are riding from the UK to Australia, there's a typical pattern. There's many roads you could take, but ultimately people cross Europe. They go through Turkey. Some will go through Iran if they can. A lot will then take the Central Asia desert route and then go through Tajikistan over the Pamirs. And there's definitely a vibe of when you get onto those classic routes, you start seeing a lot more people. But what about 40 years ago? Was that the case then?
No, we did see, going down through Europe, we did see a few people, and then we met the odd sort of person here and there. We did meet, I think we met some guys in Istanbul that had come the other way, and then we met a couple of Germans in Pakistan, I think that was. That actually he was actually in Australia. He'd emigrated to Australia, but went back home to Germany to marry his girlfriend in Germany, and then they decided to cycle back to Australia.
As you do.
Yeah, they'd never ridden. They weren't really cyclists, and
I wonder how they went.
Yeah. We met them in I think that was Pakistan somewhere, or maybe India. But it was one of those brief encounters, sort of either at a campsite or on the road, and so I don't know what happened to them. Whether we never bumped into them again. But yeah, so there were odd people around, but not the amount that are doing it today.
You sort of do wonder what that is, and my little hypothesis on it, Phill, having interviewed many people who've done these journeys, something that strikes me, because it's often a question I ask people, is where did you get the idea for travelling in this way? Like, why choose to travel on a bike? Why? And the amount of guests who have taken long journeys who have told me, I didn't know that I could do it until I saw someone that was doing it. And I thought, wow, I'd like to do that. And I wonder, is that like you see social media now, and is it a case that perhaps with social media people are coming across and think, oh, wow, that looks fun, and maybe there's more people doing it. I'm not sure. Because I do feel like there's more people doing it than there used to be.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, and I think it is more of a social media thing now as well, where, you know, it's so much easier, so much sort of more accessible than it was in our day. I mean, the only way you knew about people in our day that were doing this sort of stuff was you'd go to a slideshow. You know, with the cycling clubs and stuff, you'd get people from another club who'd done a trip to Switzerland or something like that, and they'd do a slideshow for you, and you go, oh, wow, that looks good, let's go there. Or you'd read a book, but there weren't many. You know, there were people like Dervla Murphy and Eric Newby and people like that writing books about sort of doing trips, not necessarily on bikes. I know Dervla Murphy did, but we'd also, both myself and Dave were quite into climbing as well before we left to go travelling, and we'd been to see, you know, people like Chris Bonington and Doug Scott doing slideshows of their climbs in Nepal and Pakistan and places like that. So you kind of got that side of it, but there wasn't so much of the sort of knowing people, really. You know, there wasn't even much in newspapers or anything like that about people doing that sort of stuff. So
hearing that you were into climbing, I can see why there was such a big pull to get to the Himalayas.
Oh yeah. It was. You know, we'd say we'd been to see these, you know, the slideshows by Chris Bonington and Doug Scott, and chatted to them afterwards about, you know, how they'd done it and how they'd got on, and yeah, it just sounded like epic. The whole sort of expedition sort of thing, trekking for weeks up these valleys, completely away from civilization. And we'd always been into sort of walking and climbing anyway, so going to the Himalayas was just sort of a massive sort of tick for me. You know, it's something that I definitely wanted to do.
Spoken a lot early on in the show about your early interaction with the cycle touring club there, but something else you were really into that you told me about, I didn't know it existed before either, was the Rough Stuff Fellowship.
yeah. Sounds like something from Lord of the Rings, doesn't it?
The Fellowship of the Rough Stuff, exactly.
Yeah.
So for listeners who are like me, who didn't know that this existed beforehand, how would you describe the Rough Stuff Fellowship?
So the Rough Stuff Fellowship came about, it was originated in I think the mid-50s, about 54, 55. And it was basically a group of, mainly I think, cyclists from the cycle touring clubs who would basically take the bikes over, you know, bridleways and over mountains. And in the Lake District, there's a lot of tracks that link the valleys together, cut passes and stuff like that. You'd kind of ride up one valley, and to get to the road on the other side, you'd kind of take this, you know, Stye Head Pass or whatever over the hills. And they were like basically, you know, donkey tracks or cart tracks, really, a lot of them, and even worse than that. And so people started doing this with the bikes, and there was a famous guy, gosh, I can't remember his name, Robbins, I think, and he was a cyclist from Liverpool. And there's a famous track in North Wales called the Wayfarer Track.
I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, well, the Wayfarer Track I think his name was Robinson. I'll confirm that with you. But he was one of the first people to go over this track with his bike. This was in about 1919, something like, in a snowstorm. And he wrote up this article for one of the sort of cycling magazines about it. Anyway, the track became known. His pen name, he used to write a lot of articles about cycle touring and stuff like that, and his pen name was the Wayfarer. And so this track, the track got renamed, and then I think it was on this, no, it must have been when he died. I think when he died, sort of in the 40s or 50s maybe. And they put a plaque on the top of the Wayfarer track. There used to be a little book, I don't know if it's still there, that you could sign when you sort of cycled over it. So basically the RSF with the Rough Stuff Fellowship was kind of this club of people who liked taking the bikes over mountains and doing tracks. I mean, we took our bikes over Snowdon and over Helvellyn and stuff like that, and people used to do that in the Alps. They do all these, you know, like the Gemmi, I don't know if you've heard of the Gemmi Pass in Switzerland.
I haven't, but I'm so going to Google it after as well.
So it's this track that goes from Lukabad to, I'm not sure actually, I can't remember now. And it's basically a 3,000 metre cliff, and this track's sort of literally carved out of this cliff going up, and that became a thing to do in Switzerland, you know. So we did that years ago, and we did the track underneath the North Face, the Eiger. People used to do that, and it was all sort of based around there, taking your bikes and camping out, having an adventure somewhere and camping out in the wild. So
again, it wasn't something that stressed you to be going out to do those things. It was more like that was something you were seeking out, really.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah, because it was, you know, he was doing stuff that other people were, well, not many people we're really doing. And you'd be out in the mountain, out properly in the mountains. It's great on a mountain pass and that, but you still kind of have the traffic and have other people around. Whereas, you get on these sort of remote sort of tracks in the middle of nowhere and you're really out there on your own.
Gravel cycling before gravel cycling was a thing.
Oh, yeah.
This is proper stuff.
I don't know whether you looked up, I mentioned to you about the Instagram feed for the Rough Stuff archive, yeah.
I love it.
And they've done a couple of books as well with the printed photos in and stuff.
I need to get one of those.
They've done 2 books, I think it is. I can't remember what they're actually called. It's just something like the RSF archive photos or something. Yeah, but they're amazing.
It's been a real big joy to sort of look back through this and just see, it's what we see people doing now. It's not new stuff necessarily, but just the fact that there was no social media then. It is really through old original images that you see it. I recently interviewed a guest, James Bale. Hi, James. And we were talking about his adventure, which was taken at a very similar time to yours, Phill. He was in the Himalayas there in 1986. And what I loved was I got a whole collection of photos from James. And one of the ones that I love the most, I mean, his images are amazing, as are yours. But it's almost like the 1986 original kit grid, and it's all the stuff he took on his bike laid out on the carpet or the floor.
Oh, right, yeah.
And what struck me was there was 35 film canisters in that photo.
Oh, yeah.
And a journal and a pen.
Yeah.
And that's how you documented stuff back. You didn't have Instagram. There's certainly no TikTok. Like, all this type of stuff wasn't there. What about you? How many, because film is obviously bulky, but you do have photos.
Yes, well, that's one of the interesting things between my trip and Jamie's trip. I've been sending him out the photos of where we were at certain times, and he's been trying to recreate them. And, look back at it, because we had to do exactly the same, because you couldn't, once you were out of Europe, you couldn't buy film, so we had to take it with us. So, we had something like 20 or 30 rolls of film. But you look at how many photos, like Jamie's taking now, And I've looked at my, sending out the photos of him now. So by the time I'd got to Kathmandu, which was, I think, about 6 months it took us to get there, I'd taken, I think I was on film 9. So I'd taken 9 films of 36, usually around 36 exposures. So you were limited to kind of, you couldn't take too many photos because you'd run out of film and you wouldn't be able to take any photos at all.
And then of the ones that you got developed, who knows how many of them came back as... You never got 36 great photos from a 36 roll of film.
No, but you didn't even know. I mean, I never saw my photos.
Until you're back.
Yeah, we used to send the photos back. In Europe, we used to post them back, or you'd meet people in like Istanbul who were flying back to the UK, and you go, "Oh, could you take these films back for me? They're exposed," and you just have to trust people that they would do that, because that was all. If you lost the film, well, that was it. And the first time I actually saw any photos that I'd taken was when I got to Australia, because I'd sent the photos back, and Mum and Dad were send them off to get them developed, so they would then. And I used to, so every photo I took, I had a little book. So every photo I took, I wrote down where the photo was, what the date was, what the photo was of. So they could then, when they saw the picture, they could link that up, and I'd send that back to them every now and again, separate to the actual photos in case it all got lost. And then when I was in Australia, when I got to Australia, they got some prints done of just random prints across the sort of bit to Australia and sent them out to me. And that was the first time that I actually saw any of the photos that I took.
Because that's the other thing. It's not like this instant satisfaction of saying, "Oh, no, I didn't take that out. Oh, I need to reline this shot." Like, it's just however you took it, isn't it?
That's right, yeah. And the sort of really special shots as well, where you think, wow, that's going to make a fantastic photo. But you couldn't really afford, you might take... Possibly, if it was a really good photo, you might take 1 or 2, but you couldn't afford to take too many. Like now, you'd probably take a dozen photos or something and go and scroll through, But then it was like one photo, and you kind of just have to hope that it came out okay. Because I remember one of the photos, I ended up in Java. I went down through Mount Bromo into the crater of Mount Bromo and cycled across the crater, or the caldera. And then went up the actual volcano, because I'd always wanted to go, it's still on my list now actually, to go and see a volcano with lava.
Yeah, proper erupting, yeah.
Yeah. So there was kind of smoke pouring out of the top of this thing, and I left my bike at the bottom and walked up to the top of the actual cone in the caldera and took some photos. Unfortunately, it was just kind of bubbling mud and stuff at the top. But so I took a few photos, and the photos kind of going into the crater and out of the other side. The gases that were that were coming out of the actual volcano must have affected the film. And so that half of that film
is just totally gone.
Well, no, but it was all like discoloured, and so the photos were actually really good. I think there is one of them in the bunch that I sent to you, looking down into the crater. That wasn't too bad, but it was all sort of dark and not clear and stuff. So, but again, I didn't know that until we got the films developed.
You don't. You are still taking journeys, whether they're on a bike or a motorbike, you still take journeys now. Is taking photos, is documenting your journey something you've always enjoyed doing? I know before we talked to each other and spoke for this session, I know you'd mentioned that you were reading back through your journal, so I know that you obviously wrote about your travels at the time, but have you always been into this type of documenting it on the go, like through your photography or through writing?
Yeah, more through photography. I think the writing was, I kept the diaries when we were travelling because, so much happens, you're just never going to remember it all. So it was really more of an aid memoir than a sort of diary, really, just sort of the stuff that happened each day. And just sort of look at, things, even stuff like, when we got a puncture and, keeping a record of how many punctures you got or when the bearings on your front wheel broke and things like that, because you forget all that sort of stuff. But the photography, I'd always been into photography. I was looking, my dad was quite a big photographer as well, so I picked that up, another thing I picked up from him. So, I'd had a camera from when I was quite young, and so all the travels that I did cycling, even the club cycling and stuff that I'd done, I've got, photographs of all that sort of stuff. So it was almost second nature, really, to try and... It wasn't really... You didn't really see it as kind of documenting it like you perhaps would now. You were just taking photographs of the event or where you were at the time. So I've been over the last few years. I've been working through. I've got thousands of slides. So I've been working through them all and trying to scan them in and get them all digitised. Because I've done that with my dad's as well. And unfortunately, my parents have both passed away now. And when we cleared the house, I've got all my dad's slides. Found the ones he cycled around Switzerland back in the sort of mid 50s, about I think 1954. Did the cycle trip round Switzerland. And I found his black and white prints of that in an album. So
there's something magic about that, looking at that. My dad was a photographer. And when he was in Australia, his job, he was a geologist, and he got a gig for a while in what was the Antarctic Division, which was a real big deal. And he went to Macquarie Island. It was an icebreaker called the Neladan. Sorry, listeners, we're on a slight tangent here, just talking about my dad, who sadly only just recently passed away as well. But I always remember growing up as a kid, he'd take out his slides and in the slide projector, and you'd watch, you'd put a white sheet up on a wall if it wasn't white, and you'd watch the slides, or at least we did.
Yeah.
I remember, the penguins and stuff like that he had in Macquarie Island was always something captivating for me. But I've actually got the slide projector, which is fantastic. Oh, wow. So it's sort of living on in a way now. And there is something awesome about just getting stuff from the past and looking at it.
Oh, yeah.
You do that, obviously, don't you?
Yeah. Especially with going through, say, all my slides over the last few years, you forget all the stuff you've done, really, and it's so good just sort of recapture, because it's like the sort of the RSF archive book, it's capturing a moment in time that is never going to happen again. You're seeing that image of those guys on the bike and up on the Stye Head Pass or something like that with the sort of 1950s socks and shorts and the smoking the pipe, and it's that sort of, unless you were there and saw that,
you wouldn't believe it.
It's not an image that you could sort of conjure up, and I think that's the great thing about sort of photography and travel as well. I love reading old travel books. Really enjoy, I don't know if you come across him, who wrote the James Bond books? I can't remember his name. Anyway, his brother Peter, it was basically who he based James Bond on, and he travelled round sort of all the stands and China back in the sort of 20s and 30s, and some of the images in his books are just amazing. Ian Fleming, right? Well, so his brother.
I
Peter
did Google
Fleming,
that. Sorry.
Yeah. So Peter Fleming was Ian Fleming's brother. And allegedly, he was a spy for the British out there. Allegedly, the 007 books are based on him, and he got up to all kinds of stuff, and they're just fantastic books to read, and you kind of, you sort of picture the sort of scene there, and it's just amazing, yeah.
Now, listeners, if you've been dreaming about taking a bike adventure in France but putting it off, well, dream no longer. At the end of June this year, I am leading Seek Travel Ride's first ever bike tour. It's 6 nights and 5 days of cycling, starting and finishing in the beautiful city of Toulouse. So picture this, you're going to join me and a like-minded small group of people rolling through stunning scenery, quiet roads, charming villages, heaps of history and culture all along the way each and every day. Plus, all your meals are catered for, hotel stays are included, and you've got me as one of your ride leaders. Head to seektravelride.com or click the link in the show notes, find out more about the tour and book your spot. Don't delay, there's only a couple of spaces left. Now back to the episode. I want to take you back to the trip now. There were 3 of you that started, but in Turkey it became 2 of you, and there's a story behind this, and I need to know the story.
Yeah. So yeah.
2 Davids became 1. What happened?
That's right, yeah. So there was Dave Clark and Dave Cross, and so me and David and Clark had known each other for years, and we got on fine. There was no real sort of big issues, and then we got to Istanbul, and I think we stayed there for about 5 days a week or something like that to sort out, because we had to sort out visas and where we were going, because we were hoping to go down through Iran, as we'd called at various Iranian embassies coming down through Europe. We'd got, no, in England they said no, you can't have a visa. So we thought, well, we'll try some of the embassies on the way down, and we got to, I think it might have been Belgrade actually, when we were getting Dave's bike fixed, and we went to the Iranian embassy there. And we knocked on the door, and it was like one of these big old Victorian doors with a little hatch that opens. So we knocked on the door, and this little hatch opened, and this sort of very Iranian-looking chap was there. And we said, we'd like to get a visa for your beautiful country, we want to come and travel. And he kind of went, English, American, French, like that, and drew his hand across his throat, and then sort of slammed the door shut in our face, this little window shut. And we were thinking, okay, right, that doesn't look like we're going to get a visa for Iran then. So we were trying to think of what we could do and ways around. Anyway, when we got to Istanbul, we met some guys who'd just come back through Iran on buses. And they said, you can get a 7-day visa. So we had to go through a few hoops and things. We had to get a letter from the British Embassy to basically sort of write off any liability they had to us, and we had to take this to the Iranian embassy, and then it took a few days to sort that out. So anyway, we managed to get these visas. So we had to hang around. And then on the last day, so we've been there a week, and on the last day we said, right, we'll meet up at the ferry station at, I don't know, it's 2 o'clock or something like that, so we can get on the other side, get over the Bosphorus and get on the other side and get out of Istanbul for the night. So myself and Dave turned up. We all had different things to do, wanted to either see something else in Istanbul or post letters back home and things. Anyway, myself and Dave met at the ferry station at sort of 2 o'clock or whatever it was. And then Dave Cross didn't turn up. And we were waiting around and waiting. And of course, this was before mobile phones or anything, so we didn't know where he was. And then we were kind of, well, what do we do? Do we carry on? Do we stop here? Anyway, eventually what happened was Dave turned up after several hours, actually. I can't remember exactly, but it was quite a while. So obviously we'd been hanging around and we were a little bit miffed, to be fair. And kind of made that known that, he could have come and just told us. It hadn't been a problem if he'd have said, I need another hour or so. We'd have gone, well, okay, fine, we'll go and do something, But we were kind of stuck there waiting around, not knowing whether he was going to turn up or whatever. So anyway, we got the ferry over, and there was a bit of a bad air, really. Nothing, we didn't have a massive fallout or anything. So we set off on the other side, and as you go out of Istanbul and you start climbing up quite a long hill, and, as a cyclist, you kind of end up at your own little pace. So Dave Clark was always faster than me, and then it was usually me, and then Dave Cross behind. So we kind of headed up, and we kind of knew where we were going to. We discussed the route each day and things. So anyway, we got sort of near the top of the hill, and David stopped, and I stopped, and then we kind of waited, and then it started getting dark, and then Dave didn't turn up, and we were like, oh, crap, what do we do now? So by then it was sort of, getting quite late, so he'd got half the tent and everything, so...
Did he have the poles, or did he have the ground sheet?
Yeah, because we had a three-man tent between us, so we'd split things like tools and cooking gear and that, so each had different stuff to sort of share the weight out. So he had, I can't remember, I think he had the outer of the tent, I think we had the poles and the inner.
At least you could put something up.
Yeah, so anyway, that night we ended up, we basically bivvied out in this half-built house at the top of this hill and thought, well, there's nothing we can do now. We rode back down the road to see if we can see him a bit and couldn't see him, but it's kind of how far back do you go? Because we'd gone quite a few miles. So we thought, well, we'll camp here and we'll doss out here and hopefully we'll sort it out in the morning, catch up with him. And what had happened is, as we were going through Europe, this had happened to Dave Clark. We'd got separated off one day in, I think it was in Italy. And we thought, oh gosh, and unfortunately we'd kind of run into each other later on that day. The problem with on a bike is, you end up, if somebody takes a turn off and you wait and they come out maybe a bit further on the road and then you end up not knowing whether they're in front of you and you've got to try and catch them up, or they're behind you and you've got to wait for them to catch you up. So we thought, right, we need a plan. We need, if this happens in Asia somewhere, we need some kind of a plan to try and meet up again. So we came up with this plan that if the person who was separated from the other two and we hadn't met up in the next few days, because we always knew we had post response, set up for various different places, so we knew where we were going to be roughly at what date, and we had a kind of rough route up to our next post response, sort of, we each knew where we were going. So he said, well, we know roughly the route, so if we haven't met up with the person who's missing after, I think it was 3 days, if we haven't bumped into them on the road and we haven't met up with them, on the fourth day, the two that are together ring home to the parents of the one that's missing. Now, bearing in mind, back in those days, you couldn't just pick a phone up and ring home. So you had to go to the main post office and book an international call, which, was quite expensive, and you had to, not only did you have to book the call, you had to book how long you wanted the call as well. So we had this plan anyway, so anyway, we kind of looked round for him the next day, and then we thought, well, okay, we'll go to the police and make sure he's not, been in an accident or something like that. So we went to the police, and, they didn't know anything. They checked the hospitals. They hadn't had anybody in. So we did everything we could. So we thought, well, we'll carry on, and, if we bump into him on the road, great. And then if we don't, we've got this plan, so we'll ring his parents. So anyway, we hadn't bumped into him after 3 or 4 days, so we got to the next town on the route, booked this phone call to ring home, or ring his parents. So it was me that did the deed.
God, that would have been a fun call to make.
Yeah, so we booked, we thought, oh, it's only going to be a quick call. It's going to be, oh, hi, it's, we're in Turkey. Have you heard from Dave? Where is he? And then, that was the other part of the thing, was that the person who was missing was to tell his parents where they were and wait there.
This is a great scheme, by the way.
Yeah, we would cycle to go and meet him at this point.
Before the time of mobile phones and text messages and emails.
That's
and
right,
anything, yeah.
So anyway, we got this call, and fortunately his parents picked up. I think we'd arranged the call so it would be like, early evening UK time. So I picked the phone up, and I can't remember if it was his mum or I think it was his mum that answered the phone. And they said, oh, hi, it's Phill, we're in Turkey. Dave's gone missing. Have you heard from him? And she went, no, why? Why? What's happened? What's that? And we'd only booked, say, about a minute for the call, because we thought, oh, it's going to be a quick call. So we were kind of just trying to sort of talk over what had happened, and obviously she was started panicking. Oh, we've not seen him for 3 days, and then of course the line cut out and it went dead. Beep beep beep.
What a cliffhanger!
Yeah. So then it was like, oh crikey. So okay, so they've not heard from him. We've not heard from him. So then it was like, so again we went to the police station in the place, and we kind of went through the whole thing again and said, look, we've rung. They've not heard home from him. So they checked on the hospitals again and escalated it a bit, sort of thing. So we hung around there for a couple of days, I think. And then they said, look, we've kind of checked all the hospitals. We've been in touch with other police stations and what have you. And nobody's heard anything. We don't, he's not been reported. We've not found any dead bodies or anything like that. So we thought, well, the only thing we can do is carry on to the next post response. And he knows that we're going to be there on such a date. We'll go there and see whether he's picked his mail up, and then we could possibly leave a message for him there. So that's what we did. We carried on to the next one, and his post was still there. So we thought, well, he's obviously not been here. We'll leave a note for him. So we left a note for him saying, this is our route. Please get in touch. Hope you're okay. Blah blah blah. So then we carried on around Turkey. So because we could only get a 7-day visa for Iran, we thought, well, we can't cycle through Iran in that time. So we planned this route to go around Turkey and then back to Istanbul, and then catch a bus from there to put the bikes on a bus and go over to Tehran, and then get another bus in Tehran to get over through Iran. So we kind of did this big loop, and so I think we had 2 or 3 post restants on the way, and each one we'd leave a note saying, hey Dave, we're okay, hope you're okay, blah blah blah. Not heard from him. Anyway, we got back to the post restant in Istanbul. This was after probably 2.5 months, or so maybe 3 months, I can't remember exactly now. So we got back and we thought, we'll have a few days in Istanbul and sort stuff out before we get the bus over to Tehran. And we got back and there were letters from home there, and please ring home immediately, and then we got there was a letter there from the British Embassy saying, please could you present yourselves at the British Embassy as soon as possible. And we're thinking, oh crikey, because we'd kind of, we knew it was serious, but we kind of thought, well, if he was dead in a ditch, they'd have found him, by now, and we'd know about it. So we kind of assumed that he was okay, but we didn't really know. His parents had been ringing my parents to find out what was going on, because my parents didn't know any more. They didn't even know that he was missing because we hadn't been in touch with them.
Because you didn't book the phone call; it was expensive.
That's right, yeah. So then we had to go and have an interview at the British Embassy, because it had been escalated. I think Dave's parents had been onto the Foreign Office to find out what was going on and see if they could trace him. And anyway, so we got there and we explained what had happened and what we'd done, and that we'd been to the police and we'd done this and we'd done that.
You've left a paper trail.
Yeah, and they said, oh well, okay, you've done everything you could do. He's probably just kind of gone off and he's okay, and he's, So we thought, well, there's nothing else. We'd done everything we could do, so we kind of decided to carry on. We caught the bus over to Tehran and over to Pakistan and stuff, and then Dave, as it turned out, I mean, I've seen him a few times since I've been back. Bizarrely, never actually discussed it with him. But he eventually got over to Thailand, I think, and ran out of money. And from what I believe, he hadn't been in touch with his parents until he got to Thailand and ran out of money, and then got in touch with them and said, oh, can you send us some money? That's the story I've had anyway. I have bumped into him a couple of times, but we've never actually talked about what happened.
Wow. I'd so love to find out. Oh, gosh.
Yeah, I must, next time I do see him, I must have a word with him and say, well, what actually did happen? Why did he do that?
And he must have been really tired on that hill climb. He just dropped off.
Yeah. Part of the story that I did hear, and I say whether it's true or not, I don't know. He bumped into a German cyclist, I think, and kind of whether that was actually on that day or whether that was after, I'm not really sure, and decided to go off with him. But yeah, so he eventually got to Bangkok and then ran out of money and ended up coming home, I think.
I just love the idea that each post restant you're leaving a little message. Hi, Dave. We're off to this one now.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's right, yeah.
What a story. It's funny, Phill. I knew I would get great stories when I spoke with you, because when I spoke with Jamie, he was telling me how he grew up with these stories. So this is just little mini one.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness me. I have to talk about Iran then. I know you didn't cycle there, but Iran, 7 days to cross Iran via bus. What was that experience like?
Yeah, it was interesting, amazing. I mean, the people were amazing. We didn't know what to expect. I mean, obviously there was, Iran's seen as this, real sort of anti-West place now, and it was then. The Ayatollah had only been in power then, I think, for about 4 or 5 years. And I remember our first sort of introduction to Iran was at the border crossing from Turkey to Iran. And there was this big sort of fence there, and there was all the, down with America and death to the infidels and stuff painted on the walls of the actual, the border crossing post. And so the bus pulled up, and everybody had to get out the bus, and all the stuff came out the bus, and they had the Revolutionary Guards, who were these kind of young kids in their early teens, a lot of them, with AK-47s. It was very intimidating, and we were the only Westerners on this bus, and it was mostly Iranians that were on the bus, and they were lovely. And every time there were a lot of checkpoints along the way as well, and the Revolutionary Guards would get on the bus and they'd pick us out because we were the foreigners on the bus. So you'd get the AK-47 pointed at you, and passport. Yeah, most of these revolutionary guards were just kind of, I suppose, probably they hadn't seen many Westerners, and were interested. But then there were the ones that were obviously on the power kick as well, who got a bit, a bit leery, and the Iranians on the bus would come and, kind of back them off and go, oh, hang on, and, just hang on a bit, guys, and they'd feed us, and they'd, we're giving us drinks and all this sort of stuff. So in the actual, the border crossing, in the hall, so there was this quite a large hall with this little window at the end of it, and it was just absolutely rammed with people. So there were, bus drivers and all this sort of stuff, and lorry drivers trying to get through. And you basically got your passport and threw it down the hall towards this window. And if it didn't reach the window, it hits the back of somebody's head, and they'd kind of get it, and then they'd throw it on a bit further, and eventually it would make it to this, or you hoped it would make it to this window, went in this window. And then every now and again, this handful of passports would come flying out of the window. It'd just throw them out into this sort of mass of humanity. And then people would start grabbing these, oh, that's not my passport, and then pass it on to the next person, oh, that's not mine, and it was just utter chaos. This kind of went on for, oh my gosh, it was hours. We were there for hours and hours. And then eventually everybody got back on the bus, and they'd managed to retrieve their passports, and, it was all sorted. And then we headed off to Tehran, and then we had the joy of, when you arrive in Tehran, the bus station for all the buses that kind of went westwards was one side of Tehran, and all the buses that went eastwards the bus station was on the other side of Tehran. So we had to cycle across. We had to get the bikes back together and cycle across Tehran, which was interesting in itself. That was our first introduction to Asian driving, really. People were driving on the pavements, on the wrong side of the road. It's just utter chaos. That was a bit of an eye-opener. And then we stopped off in I can't remember what the name of the tower is. There's a famous big sort of tower. I think is it the Tower of Martyrs or something like that in sort of central Tehran. Anyway, we had to cycle past that, so we stopped there to take some photos. Obviously, there weren't many Westerners in Iran at the time. It was the middle of the Iran-Iraq war, and so we became quite the interest. So all these people were coming around taking photos of us, and all really pleasant, really nice. It was all very upbeat and nice. And people going, oh, come back and stay with us, and we're going, oh, we can't, we've only got 7 days, and I think we'd used up 2 days of it getting to Tehran. We had to head across, and then we got this other bus to Zahedan, which is right in the far eastern Iran. That went sort of further south, down towards, is it Bahman, down that way. So at night, we actually saw, I remember seeing them firing, I don't know, the missiles or something over towards the Iraq border, and they say there were lots of checkpoints along the road and stuff like that, and incredibly hot as well. I mean, I remember it being, I think it was around 48, 49 degrees going through there, because it was the height of summer as well. It was probably, when would it have been, end of August, I guess.
Would that have been the hottest part of your trip, or did Australia sort of match that a bit?
It was sort of between there, but the Baluchi Desert and the Australian Desert were the two hottest places, up around the sort of, certainly the high 40s, So that was interesting.
Where did you go to from Iran then? Obviously I know you got to the Himalayas, but how did you connect from Iran to the Himalayas? Did you go through Pakistan? Yeah,
so we got off the bus in Zahedan, which is about 100 miles inside of Iran, and then we had to cycle there to the border across the deserts. That's all, it was like proper desert road, just corrugations and just dirt and dust sort of thing. And then we got to the border at Taftan, the Pakistan border at Taftan, and then we had to cycle across Baluchistan and then up to Quetta, and then we went up the Bolan Pass, I think it was, one of the famous passes there, up to Quetta, and then from Quetta we headed up towards Islamabad. But that was where Dave got just outside of Quetta. We'd left Quetta and went to a place called Lorelei. 'Cause in Pakistan, have you heard of dak bungalows?
No.
So in India, they have I don't know whether they still exist, but back then they used to have these things called dak bungalows, and they were basically sort of residences for government, official people travelling around the country on business, and you could stay there. So it's like a government-run, not really a hostel. I mean, normal people weren't supposed to use them. It's mainly for government officials, but because we were travellers, you were okay to stay there as well, generally anyway. We left Quetta and headed up towards this place called Lorelei not far from the Afghanistan border. And Dave started feeling quite unwell that day. So we got to the dak bungalow in Lorelei, and he felt really, really rough the next day. we said, oh, we'll have a rest day sort of thing, and you've come down with obviously some kind of bug. I went off into the nearest village to go and get some food and stuff like that, and got shot at actually going there, because all this was like tribal sort of country, so everybody, all the men walked around with, you know, old British Enfields and things. So I was cycling down the road and heard this gunshot. I don't know whether they were actually trying to shoot me, but it certainly came quite close.
It's really disconcerting.
It was at the time.
I've had that experience in France when it's hunting season, and I've been out on my bike.
Yeah.
I'd like to think it's a trip being in France during hunting season. Like,
yeah,
there's a reason why I have a bright orange helmet. Let's put it that way. It's high.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's disconcerting hearing gunfire. I couldn't imagine being in your situation. That's a bit different. Holy smokes.
Yeah, at the time you kind of hear it and you kind of go, "Oh, what was that?" You don't realise, you hear a bit of a bang and then you hear the whiz, and then you kind of go, "What was that?" And then saw these guys, further with a little group of guys. And I think in fact, I don't think it was those that took the photograph, but I've got some photographs that I think I sent one of them to you with all the tribal guys.
There's like three of them sort of together. I have seen this. And listeners, I'll be sharing these images on our social pages as well, of course, because if you're like me, you will love just looking longingly into each of them, thinking Phil's got a great story behind every single one.
Anyway, going back to Dave. As it turned out, Dave, when I got back, he was lying on the floor, wrapped in his mosquito net, basically looking like he was having some kind of seizure. He was shaking around on the floor like that, and I thought, oh my God. I literally thought he was dying.
That'd be a horrible feeling.
Oh, it was awful, and you can't, you get put in that position. You kind of think you're pretty, competent at most stuff, and you go, crikey, what do I do? What do I do now? And we had first aid kit, and we were both taking malaria tablets as well. So it wasn't something that crossed my mind. I thought, well, it can't be malaria because we're taking tablets. Anyway, I got the guy at the Dak bungalow. I ended up writing him a note. I took him into the room and showed him Dave and said, look, and I wrote him this note, doctor, and wrote him a note saying, doctor, please come quickly. My friend is dying. So I sent him this note.
Things you never thought you'd do.
Yeah, and so I gave this note to the guy in the Dak bungalow and said urgent. Anyway, he went off and he got this doctor, and the doctor turned up an hour or two later, I think, and he could speak really good English as well, so that was great. And he said he took a look at him and took his temperature and stuff, and he said, oh yeah, he's got malaria. And we were like, I was like, oh, how can he have malaria? He's taking tablets. And he said, oh yeah, they don't always work. And he said, yeah, give him these paracetamol or aspirin, I think it was. Here's a course of paracetamol, aspirin. He'll plenty of water. He'll have a bad headache for a few days, but he'll be all right in a few days. And he was. But it was really, oh gosh, real sort of eye opener as to how quickly it can kind of turn really sort of nasty.
Because I know Dave got quite sick. Like, that wasn't the only time he got sick.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned he got dysentery. Was it hepatitis?
He got amoebic dysentery. Yeah.
Like, he got really whacked with that. Did you ever actually get sick at all? Like, were you very ill?
Yeah, I mean, I got the usual, deli belly and feeling a bit rough and stuff like that. But I have to say, compared with Dave, I got off very lightly. I mean, we think what happened was he got bronchitis going down through Europe. We ended up bivvying out one night on some park benches in Germany, and it was a really cold night, so we woke up with the frost on the sleeping bags. And then a few days later, Dave got this sort of hacking cough and went to see a doctor and got. They said, "Oh yeah, you got bronchitis," and he got I think it was an antibiotic injection or something like that. And after that, he just seemed to he seemed to catch everything. And he'd been a really fit guy. I'd never known Dave to be ill.
His immunity just got totally whacked, obviously, didn't it?
Yeah, so I think it just whacked his immunity, and he seemed to just get everything that was going. So yeah, he ended up in hospital in Islamabad with amoebic dysentery. And then on the way back down from, he got the sort of usual, the deli bellies and all that sort of stuff as well. And then coming back down from Everest, he found out he got hepatitis as well. So he kind of, he said, we got back to Kathmandu and he was like, oh, that's it, I've had enough of being so ill. And obviously hepatitis is, you've got to be really careful what you eat and how you look after yourself. So he said, yeah, I've had enough, I'm going to go home.
Yeah, and that was where you then went solo.
Yeah.
I don't want to go there yet, though. I want to go to the Himalayas, obviously, because this is a big story. This is a big part of your adventure, clearly. And We spoke earlier in the show, Phill, how, as a climber, seeing and hearing stories about people that have gone to these mountains, I can see 100% naturally the pull for you to go there as well.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Tell me about it. What was it like arriving in the Himalayas?
Oh, it was amazing. It was stunning. I mean, I remember the first view we got of them. Because we from India, we ended up going from Delhi up into Chitwan Park and along the Trans-Nepal Highway, and then you sort of head inland at, I think it's Mughling, and you kind of climb up gradually from like the Terai is like where the plains of India kind of meet the foothills of the Himalayas. So you gradually climb up a little bit, and there's like this sort of ridge of mountains, and then you sort of drop over into this sort of big valley that kind of runs almost the length of the Himalayas, I think. And then you see the Machu Picchu and all the the big mountains around the back of kind of Pokhara and all along there. And you just see these huge peaks in the distance of snow covered. You can see that they're miles and miles away, and yet they look so huge. And then we went up to Kathmandu. We kind of dropped into the valley and then followed the road up to Kathmandu and had a few days in Kathmandu. And of course you can, and when we arrived, it was actually quite misty in Kathmandu. It was the end of the monsoon, so it was quite hazy and stuff. We set off to go up to Everest. You follow the road out to Jiri, I think it is, and then sort of head up the tracks, and you sort of see all the mountains in the distance. At the back of your mind, you're just kind of thinking, one of those is Everest, the highest mountain in the world. And you don't know which one it is because all you can see is all these sort of peaks and just really in the distance. And it's just absolutely amazing. Incredible views, yeah.
I often ask guests to tell me about a time where nature made you feel the size of like an ant, and that has to be a time.
Oh yeah. You feel so insignificant, and especially when you come from you go to the Alps in Europe, and the Alps are big.
Yeah, and they look big, yeah.
They look big and they feel so big, but the Himalayas are twice that size. It's just incredible.
I've not been there, but it is a dream to go there and see them with my own eyes.
Oh yeah, you need to go. Yeah.
I'm a lover of photography as well, Phill. We were talking about that earlier, but it's something that I certainly know myself. Taking many photos is a photo never shows you that proper perception, that depth of field, that sense of space.
No.
Like seeing it with your own two eyes.
Yeah, photos never, when you get into these big sort of environments, it's like deserts. You go to a desert and you take a photo in the desert, and it's the same. It just doesn't capture the sort of awesomeness of it. You just don't get that feeling. Even with really, really good photos, it doesn't convey that sort of massiveness and like you say, the insignificance of how you feel when you're there. Yeah.
You know what else a photo doesn't convey? It never conveys how steep something is.
No.
Everyone that's listening to this knows where I'm going with it. Whenever you ride up a hill and then you take a photo going, oh my gosh, it's so steep, and then you look at the photo and it looks like you're on a 2% gradient slope.
Yeah.
So I want to transport you towards Everest then, because the idea to ride to Everest Base Camp, I can understand now with what we've spoken about why it was such a pull to do it, but what was it actually like doing it? Because you weren't really riding, are you? Like you're purely in hiker bike territory, aren't you? Especially on a steel touring bike.
There was quite a lot of sections you could ride. I mean, there was some stunning bits that you could ride. Not a huge amount of it. I mean, there was an awful lot of hiker bike. But the actual hardest bit of it, because we went from Kathmandu, we sort of followed the old original sort of expedition routes that they took. The first sort of days until you get, I think, to about Lukla. So I think it's about a week from Lukla to Everest Base Camp, and then about a week from the sort of roadhead at Jiri to Lukla. And the first bit of it is actually the hardest bit because you're going across the valleys. So you're going up and all the way down, and then all the way up, and then all the way down, and all the way up. And then when you actually get to Lukla in the Dudkosi, you then start following the valleys up. So although you're obviously higher up, the actual climbing is less intense, or less of it. Yeah, you're kind of going up a more. I mean, there are steeper bits. I mean, there's the bit going up to Namche Bazaar from the actual Dudkosi is, I can't remember what it is. It's certainly a couple of thousand meters. I think of literally just uphill, steep uphill. But I do remember the bit that really sticks in my mind, and I've got one of the photos of this of when we came back, was the path after Namche Bazaar up towards, I think it was up towards Tengbashe, and you're going alongside the valley, and it was the first bit really where you get the Well, we didn't actually get the views on the way in because it was still quite cloudy, because we kind of hiked in at the end of the monsoon, so it was still cloudy. But on the way back, you had this sort of sandy track, sort of single track, well, not quite single track, but a little bit wider, along the sort of edge of the valley. So it was perfect cycling with these amazing views of like Amadou Blam and Kanchenjunga, I think it is, in the background, and all these sort of peaks. Lhotse then kind of peeps into view. And it's just this stunning... Dave took a photo of me when we were cycling back, sort of just coming round the corner with Amadou Blam in the background. And I can't remember whether you can just see Everest and that in it as well. But that was amazing, the cycling there. The hardest bit of it was that it said the constant kind of... The first bit was the constant up and down, because you were going up to, several thousand metres and then dropping right the way back down to the river and then going right the way back up again. And each of those, it was quite demoralising.
Going down them would be really taxing.
Yeah, because you could ride. I mean, we tried to ride as much as we could, but there was quite a lot you couldn't ride, so you were just pushing or carrying. Certainly going up, we were carrying the bikes a lot. But I just read back through my, in preparation for the interview, I got my diaries out and I was thinking, I'll just have a look through the Everest bit. And the day we actually went up to Everest Base Camp itself, we set off. We got up to Gorak Shep, which was the sort of at almost the bottom end of the glacier. And it used to be, I'm not sure, I think there's a building there now, but it used to be basically like one of these sort of old army tents that was there, and you kind of slept in there, and there was somebody to cook and do the tea. I read through my diary for that bit going up the actual glacier, and it was just a massive slog. It was really big rocks. There were crevasses. There were these huge ice towers. Yeah, these sort of compression where the glacier kind of just compresses and it pushes the ice up into these massive sort of 20-30 metre spikes. And there were rocks, falling down all the time. And I read through my diary and it just said, felt awful. This was ridiculous. I felt terrible. It was about an hour from Gorak Shep. It was about an hour to get to the base camp for Lhotse or Nuptse. I think there was I think there were French team there climbing there. So you got to the base camp there, and it took us about an hour to get there. And we had a bit of a rest, and they came out and they were like, "What are you doing here with bikes?" And they were just kind of, what on earth are you doing here? And so they were kind of giving us drinks and stuff. And it's in my diary. It said, "Lay down on the rocks and suffered." I think it said. I remember having really bad. I got quite bad altitude sickness as well. Not really bad, but just really thick head, and you kind of lose your appetite. Even though we'd done the stops and we'd had acclimatisation stops and stuff, but yeah, I don't acclimatise very quickly. I do eventually, but not very quickly, unfortunately. So by the time we got to actual base camp, I think it was another 2.5 hours. I think it said from the Nuptse base camp to the Everest base camp. And we got there, and it's just this massive sort of relief of kind of going, that's it, we've done it, it's over. We did the sort of picture thing, and there were a few. In fact, there was an Australian New Zealand expedition that had just finished. Pete Hillary was there, and Kim Logan and Kim Carrigan, I think it was, and there was a Bulgarian expedition there as well. And they came out. They just got a guy on the summit actually, and the Bulgarians. So they were really pleased, ecstatic, and said, "Oh, coming in." They've broken out the vodka and sort of, were giving us vodka and stuff like, which probably wasn't a good idea, but
part of a proper celebration.
Oh yeah.
I have a special question to ask for you about this part of your trip. I mentioned how I have recently interviewed James Bale, who rode his bike to base camp in '86, so a very similar time.
Yeah.
And he knew I was going to interview you, and I knew that you would have similar experiences. So I asked James if he'd have a question for you, and he sent me one. So I'm going to play it through the microphone, and we're going to listen to what James has to say. So,
hey Phil, it's James here. I visited Everest Base Camp back in 1986, and we heard that someone had been there on a bicycle a year or two before us. So you were already a legend then. It feels fantastic to be able to ask you a question. So here goes. I have many memories and stories of incredible people that I met while up in the high mountains of the Khumbu. One thing that sticks in my mind are the incredible Sherpa people of the Khumbu region. To this day, I remember climbing up the moraine at the end of the Khumbu Glacier and seeing the cairns that mark the climbers who have not made it back. What stood out for me were the Sherpas who gave their lives working selflessly, without complaint, in the most extreme of conditions, helping others. Can you tell me what stood out for you in the Khumbu? Thank you.
Well, I think it's sort of similar sort of thing, really. I think, the Sherpas were amazing. You see these guys, and you kind of think, most people over here think when you talk about Sherpas of the people on the expeditions, the guys taking the stuff in for the expeditions. But of course, the Sherpas actually take all of those the villages and stuff all the way along that are away from the roadhead. Everything has to go in by Sherpas. We saw guys carrying these huge planks of wood, sort of probably 6, 7, 8 meters long. They'd have 2 of them on the back carrying these things, and they'd just, every now and again they'd have a bit of a rest. And they were walking up in flip-flops and shorts. They didn't have all the proper gear, but they were amazing guys. But I think the thing that sticks out for me was just the sort of how happy everybody was up there. The Sherpas and the kind of people that lived there. They had, you looked at these, the kid, well, even the adults, they had so little. They had they lived in this amazing place, but they had so little sort of stuff, and lived, it must have been kind of quite a hand-to-mouth existence really up there. But they were all just so happy, jolly, as if nothing was a problem. And, the tea houses that you stayed in along the trek were just basically people's houses, and they, you could sleep in there for the night, and you bought your food there, sort of thing. So a lot of them you didn't actually pay to stay there. And these guys and the Sherpinis, the lady Sherpas, they're all so happy, and full of life. Nothing was too hard for them. They must have had a really difficult life, but nothing seemed to be too hard. And I think that's probably the thing that sticks out to me, is that just how they enjoyed life.
It's interesting just watching, and listeners, I can appreciate you can't see what I see. This is an audio podcast, but just watching your face talk about that, it's like your eyes have beamed up, just sort of recollecting that sort of experience as well.
Yeah. I think you do. You do forget about these sort of things. You get on with life, and life moves on and stuff like that. But until you kind of go back to that moment in time and think, oh yeah, actually, yeah, you do forget. I think that's why you need to keep doing this stuff. I think to kind of refresh yourself how great life is, really.
While we're on a roll with questions, I asked someone else if they could ask you a question, and you're probably going to figure out who I've asked.
I bet it's Jamie.
Of course, I've asked Jamie. He's actually sent me a few.
Oh, right.
But this is the only one that he sent me as a voice memo, so I will find a way to ask you the others. But this is Jamie's question for you.
Okay, Dad, I have a question for you. If you were to go back in time to before you set off on your adventure to give yourself one piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be, and why?
What a brilliant! That's a really good question.
Oh, I know. Well, see, he's had a lot of time on his bike to think about it, hasn't he?
Yeah.
He's with Malachi at the moment. I mean, I don't know where you'll be when this episode goes out, but they're currently in Nepal. So
yeah, they're in pocket. In fact, how about this for a bizarre coincidence? When we came through the Baluchi Desert, we met a guy called Dave Berkshire from England, and he'd ridden a 1958 Norton out. He was hoping to ride it to Australia, actually. We met him in the desert in Baluchistan and ended up riding with him. In fact, we tied ropes off the back of his motorbike to hang on to these, going across the desert. We was hanging on to the ropes. It didn't work out. It ended up quite badly. We both fell off, I think. Anyway, I lost touch with Dave. We kept in touch for a bit after the travelling, and then, as you do, you lost touch. And a couple of years ago, I got back in touch with him on Facebook. I came across an article online that he'd done about his motorbike trip. And there was a picture of us in the desert with him on the motorbike. And I managed to get in touch with him again, and not actually met up with him, we said it all online. And so we've been exchanging messages for a couple of years and stuff. And he's actually in Pokhara now, doing the Annapurna circuit.
You're kidding?
No, Jamie's in Pokhara. They got to Pokhara yesterday.
Yeah. So
I messaged David. He put something up on his Facebook page saying he's just doing it's the Annapurna Base Camp or Annapurna circuit. So I messaged him and I said, "Oh, you're not going to believe this. My lad's in Pokhara now, and he's going to, he's going to be there at the same time as you. Wouldn't it be funny if you bumped into him there?"
Photo recreation opportunity.
Yeah. But anyway, going back to Jamie's question, Goss. I think probably the thing that I discovered when I was away was obviously you don't know this until it actually happens to you. When myself and Dave were travelling together, we knew each other really well. We'd done a lot of stuff together. And I think you become a little bit insular travelling as a pair. I'm naturally not an extrovert. I wouldn't say I'm an introvert, but I'm naturally not an extrovert. So I did tend to leave quite a lot of the stuff to Dave when we were talking to people and stuff like that. And then when Dave eventually came back from Nepal and I carried on my own, it was almost like another world had opened up. I was much more open to getting involved with other people and talking to other people, and not that I didn't before, but not to the same extent. And also taking an opportunity when it arises. It's so easy for something to come up, and you kind of go, oh yeah, I can't do that because I'm doing this. I've got this in my head that I want to do that, and I think you can easily miss out on a lot of stuff if you're on like on a tight time scale, or you've got too fixed a sort of plan in your head. These opportunities arise out of just out of the blue. Oh, I could go and you meet somebody else who's saying, oh, I'm going to go over here and see this temple or see this castle or whatever it is, and you kind of go, oh no, I'm doing this instead. And I think it's easy to miss out on a lot of experiences and adventures doing that if you have something too fixed in your head. So I'd probably say, if I was talking to myself now, is be more open to just doing stuff on the hoof, and doing stuff with people you've never met. Just take a leap of faith.
I love that. I've talked about that a bit with many guests before, Phill, and talked about the idea of one of the most important things you could sort of figuratively pack into your panniers is flexibility.
Yeah.
And it is that idea of being open to changing your mind, to doing things you didn't know, because you're gonna have moments that you could never plan. And opportunities come your way, and to take those opportunities as well. Oh, I love that answer. What do you think, Jamie? What do you think about it? And I'm so keen to flip that question to Jamie and find out what would he tell himself now, having had that experience. And interestingly enough, I mean, your other son, Ollie, I mean, he's about to set off, and you're going to go with him as well, aren't you, for a bit of this trip?
Well, I'm not going with him. We're actually, he's heading off to cycle over to Bangkok shortly, and so he's kind of doing the similar route to Jamie, or to Jamie and myself, but slightly different. He's going to have his own adventure sort of thing. But yeah, we're planning to. I'm planning to fly out and meet him in Dushanbe, and then do the Pamir Highway with him. And then he's going to obviously carry on, and I'm doing that with another cycling friend, Phill Cunningham. Yeah, so we're going to fly out and meet him. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to that. I sort of had it in my head for doing that with Jamie. Going out and meeting Jamie at some point and spending some time with him, and we were that was the sort of thing we'd kind of got an idea of, but unfortunately, because it took Jamie a lot longer to get over to the stands than originally planned, so basically the weather window, he
would have been hitting deep winter for the Pamirs.
Yeah, so it didn't work out, unfortunately, but Ollie's a bit more, his sort of schedule's a bit different, so he's going to be able to make it in time for sort of September, so yeah, we're hoping to fly out kind of end of August, beginning of September, and do the Pamir Highway round to up to Osh.
The adventures of the Hargreaves families continue. And I know your lovely partner, Ali, Jamie and Ollie's mum. I mean, Ali has adventures as well. I'd love to see if there's going to be an opportunity for her to somehow join up on the road too.
I'm sure she'd give you a good adventure for not cycling. Although, having said that, after nearly 30 years of marriage, last year I managed to persuade her to do a cycle touring holiday. She's not a cyclist. We do go out cycling, but she's not a cyclist, but last year I managed to persuade her to do a proper cycle touring holiday. We went down to, caught the ferry over to St Malo and cycled down the rivers to Nantes, and then across to the coast, and then back up through Brittany for about, I think we were there, about 5 weeks I think we were away, just cycle camping, and she actually really enjoyed it. I mean, the idea was, we weren't covering massive miles, but she actually really enjoyed it. We had great weather, we had a great time, so hopefully it won't be there. I don't know whether she'll be up for like doing the Pamir Highway, but...
Oh, maybe I need to talk her into the Pyrenees. You come and see my mountains. Come on, Ali.
Yeah.
Oh, and then teach me how to paint.
Yeah, that'd be good, yeah.
And listeners, that's where we're leaving things for part 1. But Phil's journey was far from over, and in part 2, we're picking up where we left off as he continues making his way towards Australia before ultimately making his way back to the UK 3 years after he first set off. So make sure to tune into part 2 when that episode drops next week. And if you love hearing these incredible stories, why not sign up for the Seek Travel Ride newsletter? It's the best way to stay up to date with new episodes, some behind-the-scene insights, and even more bike travel inspiration. Head to seektravelride.com to subscribe, or even easier, click our newsletter sign-up link, which I have included in the show notes. You can access that in your podcast player app. Until the next episode, I'm Billa Malloy. Thanks for listening. And thanks for listening to today's episode. Before you go, just another shout out to our show sponsor, Old Man Mountain, and their new Hemlock bags with flip cages. They're fork-mounted packs which will attach securely with a hook and lever flip, ensuring a stable, rattle-free ride and easy removal. They're built for durability, they're ideal for your bikepacking adventures. Check them out at our custom link, oldmanmountain.com/seektravelride, or simply click the link in the show notes. Happy riding!